I'm Ryan. Ben Shapiro has opinions on transgender people.
I'm Ryan. We'll discuss whether he's drunk or sober when we return to beer and politics.
You know, Betty White really is the greatest Golden Girl. Choosy parents choose Jif. He's so mean. He really is. Hey Ryan, are we out of partisan again?
All right, so I gave him a BAC, not as high as you might think. I gave him a 0.1, 0.1 for BAC because I think he is a little bit drunk, but he isn't terribly drunk, and he's got some mitigating factors that help him not be terribly drunk.
I like that you said not as high as I might think, besides the fact I gave him a 0.02.
I just meant from my angle. I thought you're like, that Ryan, he's going to give him a crazy high BAC.
Yeah, you would.
So we're going to start. A lot of this touches on some things that you did. We kind of got three levels of stuff that we're talking about here. We're talking about gender, we're talking about sex, and then this other category of like man, woman, okay? So first of all, sex is biology. That's what it is, right? And gender, as you mentioned, actually just references sex for purposes of association.
Yes.
And beyond that, he kind of uses this interchangeably as well. He talks about man as being male, when really man is much more specific. It is a deeper construct. If you are a man, you are an adult human male.
Nice.
So he uses all of these things interchangeably, but we really shouldn't. What we're going to focus on is we're putting man aside because man specifically references gender. And so if we're referencing gender, we can just stick with gender.
Okay.
So he says sex and gender basically are interchangeable, but they are not. We might use them interchangeably, and that's on us for being lazy or whatever, or just complacent. But it's not unreasonable for us to use them interchangeably, and this is the reason. If
Struggling today.
I know, if sex equals male,
Okay.
and gender equals male, then doesn't gender equal sex? Now, if we're talking about math, the answer is yes.
I was going to say, according to him, it does.
But the thing here is that we're actually talking about English, and we're talking about language, and this is very different. And to kind of talk about this, you touched on this a little bit. We're talking about homonyms. And for those of you who may not remember, a homonym is a word that is spelled the same, that is pronounced the same, but has two different meanings. So we're going to have a little interaction here, Ryan.
Okay.
Can you give me the definition of the word beam?
I hate you. Yes, it's a typically something made out of wood that helps support the weight of something.
It's interesting.
building.
It's interesting because I was thinking about focused rays of light in a single direction.
Oh.
So let's see, a beam that's made of wood and a beam that's made of light. Light and wood aren't the same thing, correct?
Not according to my dictionary.
So we wouldn't use them interchangeably.
I wouldn't.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Give me the definition
of beam in your eye, and it's wood.
So next, give me the definition of grave.
Grave. I'm going to say that is where we put dead bodies.
Interesting, because I was thinking it was sort of like something that's dire. So a circumstance that is dire isn't the same as a hole that you throw a corpse, right?
It turns out it's not, unless you're the corpse.
that would be a dire situation. But we wouldn't use them interchangeably.
Correct.
All right, how about this one? Give me the definition of remote.
Remote. That's going to be far away, surrounded by a lot of nothing.
Okay, so it wouldn't be something that's a minute possibility.
Ooh.
Or the clicker for a TV.
It definitely wouldn't be that.
So we're not going to use those interchangeably either. Lastly, give me the definition of second.
The position immediately after first.
So the Falcons?
Yep.
Okay, see, I was thinking
After you blow a big lead.
See, I was thinking a measure of time. So interestingly, these are all things that have the same output, but are not congruent.
Just for me. Did I pick all the ones you wanted me to pick?
You did.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So, with this in mind, he goes on to say that gender is not malleable. Okay. Now, realistically, what he should be saying is sex isn't malleable. But whatever. We're going to pretend he's not using the transitive property of equality here. Oh, wait, that's okay. So he says that gender isn't malleable, and I actually don't believe that's really the argument.
Okay.
I don't think people are saying hey, now I'm male, now I'm female, now I'm male, now I'm female. He's kind of assigning a flippancy to this that I don't think really exists.
Sure.
And I think what the argument is that gender is assigned incorrectly. So what we've been talking about here is gender is a categorization, right? And it doesn't, again, it's not unreasonable for him to think this way, or for any of us to think this way, because I'm going to put a slide up on the screen here. It's pretty magical. That shows you exactly what we're talking about. It's the percentage of people whose gender is assigned by a doctor or their parents at birth.
Okay.
The second column looks almost identical, and that's the percentage of people whose gender aligns with their sex. And this third column, which depending on the size that shows up on the screen, you may not even be able to see, is the percentage of people whose gender does not align with that sex. And for purposes of numbers, that is around 0.3%. So it's not unreasonable to think that these things go together because it happens so much of the time. But what people are asking for is they're saying, hey, this is a categorization, male or female. These are ways that we categorize. So we're going to say category A, category B.
Okay.
If I have been, when I am born, you say, you're category A. And if I grow up and all the time I'm growing up, I'm like, I feel like I'm category B. I feel like this has been assigned incorrectly.
Because it was assigned.
Because it was given to me.
Yeah.
All that's being said is I would like the ability to change that if those traits are different than we expected. Okay? So Ben here is saying, no, we shouldn't do that. And he's saying we shouldn't do that because we're using semantics and we are changing the definitions to the detriment of a biological truth.
Yes.
So that we can cater to people who are mentally ill.
Well said, yes. That is what he's saying.
That is what he's saying. And he also mentioned something about things being biologically incorrect but legally correct. Like saying, you know, he talked about castration and stuff. Yeah. I want to point out he's using words incorrectly again. For a guy who loves words, because there's nothing biologically incorrect about castration. Maybe it's morally incorrect,
right.
But that is not a function of biology.
Nope.
Cutting someone's arm off isn't a biological function. So again, using words wrong. But I kind of digress. What we really want to focus on here is he's talking about something that is a biological truth. So I want to really examine what this biological truth really is. So he's saying it's one or the other, right? It's male or female. It's door number 1, door number 2. It's black or it's white. Sure. It's on or off. It's pastes or powders.
Never going back to them again.
Certainly not. Now, the problem we run into here is that biology is not math. Biology is a sloppy science. We are dealing with life. We are dealing with things that can evolve. We are dealing with things that can mutate. Sometimes things don't add up.
Okay.
And in this scenario, we come up with people who are actually born different.
Yeah.
And the umbrella term for this is intersex. And what that means is someone who is born with anatomy that we do not consider to be male or female, or necessarily both, or traits of both. This can be people who have XX chromosomes and XY chromosomes, depending on the cell you're looking at. What? It can be people who have 2 X chromosomes and a Y chromosome. It can be people who have traits of both genders. And so you might ask, well, you know, why don't we see this a lot? And there's a couple of reasons. Number 1 is it is not super common. About between 1 in 1,500 and 1 in 2,000 births are intersex. And secondly is how we handle it when this happens.
We kill them, don't we?
We're not the Spartans, Ryan.
Oh, okay.
We let the weak live.
Oh, good
no.
for us.
What we come up with is we see the American from the American Psychological Institute. The American Psychological Association, the APA. They say sex is typically assigned at birth, or I'm quoting from them, by the way, or before during ultrasound, based on the appearance of external genitalia. When the external genitalia are ambiguous, other indicators like internal genitalia or chromosomal and hormonal sex are considered to assign a sex with the aim of assigning a sex that is most likely to be congruent with the child's gender identity. Now, some people may say, well, this is, you're talking about psychology. This is kind of a soft science here, right? But it's very important to realize that we are talking about a description of what happens, not a conscription for what should happen. You can also find extremely similar descriptions of our processes from the American Board of Pediatrics and the National Institutes for Health. So what this means is that when you are looking at what happens here, this biological truth he's talking about, well, number 1, it's not a truth because it can be different. And when it is different, the one thing it's constant is the gender identity. So what that means is that these things are not inextricably linked.
Oh.
It means we have linked them with language. Now, we have to understand language here, what language is.
I mean, I think that's clearly the case. We are only linking things with language, really.
Yeah.
Because language is how we define things.
And interestingly, yes, this moves us on to my next point, what language is. Language is a tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool. It may actually be the most powerful tool that we humans have. We use it to define our reality, to think. When was the last time that you thought not in language?
Not in language, right.
It is one of the things that separates us. If we did not have language, we wouldn't have these amazing cities and the amazing transportation we do, because we wouldn't know how to talk or define or understand any of these things. But all languages have limitations. And to kind of case in point here, he loves talking about binary so much, I'm going to say binary.
Okay.
So we look at binary, it's on or off, right? It's a 1 or a 0. Now, if you try to use binary to describe quantum computing, you can't. The reason being, in binary, there are 2 phases, 1 or 0. It's on or off.
Right.
But there are more than that in quantum computing. So if you can only use on or off, how can you describe more? And the answer is you can't. And to kind of bring it to a more normal level for people who aren't tech dorks like I am,
or dorks like he
or just regular dorks, you can't explain a 3-dimensional object using only 2-dimensional terms.
Fair enough.
So think about this. If you're limited to forward, backward, left, and right, how can you explain up or down if you don't have that? And the answer is that you can't. Now you can try. Let's say you take a cube, right, a 3-dimensional cube, and you set it on a piece of paper and you cast a shadow on it, right, because you're trying to display that shadow on that 2-dimensional surface, and you say this represents it. The problem that you come up with is that that shadow is distorted. It is not an accurate representation of that 3-dimensional object because the medium, that language, that 2-dimensional space is incapable of conveying that information. Now, because of this, because he is using a 2-dimensional language to try to describe a 3-dimensional process, he has come to some incorrect assumptions and conclusions. Number 1, that biology is constant.
Okay.
We know this is not true. And secondly, that a binary language is adequate or complex enough to describe the biology of anatomy. Now, he draws parallels here to time, like what you talked about.
Right.
I think you went into it enough. I don't need to really harp on how old are you. But it's also important to understand that time here is also a measurement. It's also something we describe. We use it as a way to describe the passage from one moment to the next.
Sure.
We measure it in seconds, minutes, hours, whatever. And specifically here, we're talking about age, right? Now, age, we're referencing a calendar year. But a calendar year, what that is, it's actually the amount of time it takes for the Earth to orbit around the sun one time. So what we're talking about is a representation of something that is physical, something that's actually happening. Now, if we had an inaccurate system of measurement for that, do you think we would change it? And the answer is yes. And we know this because we've done it. So I'm going to take you back to the United Kingdom in the year of His Majesty, 1750. We're going to go to the Calendar Act of 1750. We had discovered that the Julian calendar was incapable of keeping track of correct time. Now, for those who don't know, the Julian calendar didn't have things like leap years. And so what that means is that over a course of hundreds and hundreds of years, the calendar didn't sync up with the lunar year. I'm sorry, the solar year.
Right.
And that's important because things like harvests would be at the wrong time. The equinox wasn't actually the equinox. Things like that. And so what they did is they said, all right, we need to figure out how to fix this. We're going to figure out the right way to measure this thing. And so what they did is they said, all right, we figured it out. We're going to add leap years. We're going to do stuff. And in September 2nd of 1752, people went to bed and they woke up on September 14th. We lost 11 days of time.
That's awesome.
Because of this inaccurate system of measurement. And what's insane about that is that people rioted because they thought the government was trying to steal their lives away from them. They thought 11 days were going on, 11 days, and so they rioted in these villages, and they thought, I can't believe it, right? So with this in mind, let's take a step back just for a moment. If people are willing, thank you, people are willing to riot and get so upset about 11 days, and Ben Shapiro says, age is significantly less important than gender, maybe we can understand why people whose gender has been measured incorrectly for their entire life might think this is an important subject.
Watch your mouth.
Last call?
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
All right, Madam Brewmaster, next talking point.